Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Rochelle. I read a variety of books and I also have a disability, and today what we're going to do is my October reading wrap up. This is a little bit on the late side, I feel, but that is just because I've been in the trenches just trying to go and read books and get some extra points for my team, which is Team Druids that I am co-hosting with Ivy for the Dungeons and Book Dragons Readathon. But I finally have a little bit of some breathing room because we're in between our next quest, and I don't think I'm gonna finish any of the side quests before our new ones get added. So let's go and talk about the month of October and how I did for reading. To be honest, it was a little bit rough. If you've been a part of my channel for a while and have seen some of my posts, I kind of went and hinted at some of the stressful things that took part in October, and to be honest, the beginning of October started so well. I felt like I was getting out of any reading slump feelings that I had. I was excited to read, I was excited to pick up books, and then those events happened and my reading just kind of plummeted downward. I was struggling to really pick up a book consistently. It just wasn't my way of disassociating from a lot of the things that were happening. I found that I'd just rather play games and dive into those worlds versus the worlds that were in my books. So yeah, it was a little bit of a hit or miss towards the end. And with a lot of the books that I had for Defend the TBR, I think I might have only touched a couple, and everything else was kind of audiobooks because that was the way it felt the easiest for me to consume a book at that period of time. So let's go and look at Storygraph, because that's usually what I happen to go and look at to see how I did for that month. And of course, this is not sponsored or anything. I just happen to like Storygraph because I love how it goes and breaks everything down. So for the month of October, I read a total of 6 books, which is totally fine. But for me, the reason that the month was difficult was just because of the fact that it made it so difficult to pick up a book. Goodness, I feel like I've said difficult 50 million times. I apologize. But yeah, the month of October just wasn't easy to go and pick up a book. So that's why that month wasn't exactly enjoyable when it came to consuming books. Now, looking at the average time to finish a book, it was around 9 days, and usually it tends to be a lot quicker than that, depending on how invested I am in the book that I'm reading. And surprisingly, the amount of books that I read tended to be more fantasy, and then horror was second. I also only read around 2 young adult books. If I'm completely honest, I didn't realize how many young adult books I happen to read. I just am a little bit guilty to go and judge a book by its cover, and young adult books just happen to have some of the most fun covers that I find, and that's probably why I tend to pick up them the most. It's because the covers just tend to draw me in, but that is a goal of mine in the year of 2026. I'd like to consume less young adult books, and like I said, there's nothing wrong with that, but I would like to read a little bit more adult books. Average rating for the books that I read was 3.88. I feel like this one was kind of across the board from what I remember, but let's go and take a better look at some of the books that I read and go from lowest rating to highest rating with the 6 books that I read in the month of October. Alright, so starting with the lowest book that I read, that would be Hollow Girls by Jessica Drake Thomas. I did get this one through an audiobook. I borrowed it from the library. I want to say when I was looking at audiobooks, I really wanted to read more horror, more thriller books for the month of October. That was kind of the vibe and the mood that I was in. And I happened to see this one pop up, I think, when I was looking through my Everend account to see what book to pick up. And I decided to go and get this one through Libby because it was readily available. And honestly, I rated this one 3 stars. It wasn't really what I had expected it to be. With the cover, I was kind of thinking that it was going to be something really terrifying, really horror-filled and paranormal, and that wasn't really the vibe that I got. It kind of seemed to be more so the lines of this little girl and her best friend end up going and venturing in the woods, and they go and discover this abandoned house, and kind of discover that they have these weird abilities, and they decide that they're going to keep these secrets to themselves, also while at the same time learning that there's been a lot of missing children that have been disappearing in this specific location. But these girls kind of feel that they're going to be the ones to go and solve this and figure out what happened to these missing girls. So while this is going on, one of the other girls realizes that there's something not going on, and it's very eerie and creepy and not okay. But because her best friend is so into it, she's like, all right, I'm just gonna follow along with things. I'm gonna ignore my gut instincts. Well, then her friend ends up going and disappearing. And we flash back to many years later, and the girl's dad has also disappeared. And throughout the story, it seems to be that a lot of stuff that's going on is involved with the Fae. And now a lot of popular pieces with the Fae world tend to be that these people are beautiful, they have these stunning lifestyles, and there's just all this pretty stuff. But this book kind of follows the more traditional Fae piece, where they'll go and steal children and go and replace them with one child of their own that's a changeling. They're sensitive to silver, and they all have these wicked desires and trickery and tomfoolery, stuff like that. And that's very much what this book followed. And that was fine. There were horror pieces associated with that type of mythology and world building. But that wasn't really the type of book that I was hoping to consume at the moment. And I think ultimately that's kind of why I rated it so low. It just wasn't what I was interested in picking up at that time. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I read it when I was in a different mood, but unfortunately the book just really didn't hit well for me. Then moving on to another audiobook that I read, which was Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I also borrowed this one through Libby as well, and to be honest, I really enjoyed it. There were certain moments that were quite chaotic, but just with the tone of voice that the narrator had and the author used for our main character, I found myself laughing quite a few times just with how dry the humor was. Dry humor tends to be something that really hits well for me, and so I very much enjoyed that in the tone of voice. So with this story, basically our main character is hired on as a nanny for two rich children. And while she's going about this, we get some flashbacks and pieces of the previous children that she nannied, and it sounds like they all kind of had this similar demise that happened to them. And we get this internal monologue from our main character where she's making fun of certain things, she's going and nitpicking at things, and she doesn't seem like a sunshine and rainbows nanny that you might want, like Mary Poppins. This is probably a nanny that you would not want within 100 feet of your children. I found this book to be really interesting, and it was pretty much a stretch from what I normally read, but I really wanted to kind of dive a little bit further from the books that I consume and explore different types of writing styles and worlds that authors had. So I had a great time with this. This book was a mixture of historical, but was also unhinged and weird, and I never really knew which direction it was going to go in, which probably made it so fun and made it so easy to finish the book as quickly as I did. Then moving on to another book that I also rated 3.75, I read Mary by Nat Cassidy, and I also listened to this one as an audiobook, and I was so glad that I listened to it this way, especially since I heard that the physical book is a bit on the chunkier side. So listening to the audiobook, it was very slow at times, but at the same time still captured my interest. I feel like maybe the last 100 pages or so did get a little bit weird and lost me at some points, but ultimately I did have a good time with it. I am finding that I really love the way that Nat Cassidy writes and handles certain important topics, because with this story we basically follow a woman that is going through the early stages of menopause and trying to figure out life at a different stage in her life. So we follow this woman, Mary, who is exploring her life in the early stages of menopause. She kind of has a lot of insecurities that are associated with that, but also with her life previously before she entered the stages of menopause. It kind of seems like she's been a little bit more of a loner and is kind of looked at as being a little bit weird. No one fully understands her, and she has her own quirks that she's perfectly fine doing. Well, her aunt ends up going and calling her and needing help because she is in the older stages of life and she needs someone to take care of her now that her daughter has basically left her. So Mary kind of decides, like, sure, I'll go and do this. My aunt's also saying that she'll pay me money. I don't have a job currently. Fine, whatever, we'll do this, even though she's a little bit hesitant to go back to her hometown. And throughout the story, we kind of learn that Mary is also seeing things, and she's not entirely sure why she's seeing these things or what is going on. And I just found this book really fascinating. Like I said, I really enjoy the way that Cassidy writes and handles certain topics. And although I would say this one wasn't my favorite book of his, I do plan on going and reading his entire backlist because I'm having such a great time with them and just seeing the different things that he writes. I also would say that if you ever read a book by Cassidy, read the author's notes as well. I think his author's notes just really deep dive into his reasons for writing specific books and the thoughts that go behind them. And honestly, I feel like author's notes aren't highlighted as much as they should. They were definitely a piece that I would always skim past when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I just love looking into them and understanding a little bit more about the author's reasoning for bringing a book a specific way and making certain choices that happen. So just a little tangent about how much I feel like author's notes are not highlighted as much as they should. Then the next book I have is Immortal Dark by Tigest Girma. This one I rated 4 stars. I can't remember entirely if this one was said to be a YA or not, but if it is YA, I think that is probably not accurate or should be an accurate label for this book, because honestly it was quite dark, much darker than I expected it to be, which made it a little bit hard for me to get into the book in the beginning because both of our main characters were kind of unlikable to a severe extent. I do really love morally gray characters. They are some of my favorite to read about, but these characters almost felt even a bit more extreme past morally gray, and to the point where you almost felt you couldn't justify completely their actions and what they were doing. And also, I would say as well to go and check your trigger warnings with this book because it is so dark that it might hit some trigger warnings that you're not entirely comfortable going and reading. With this book, we basically follow our main character who is going to be going to court soon. She has lost her sister and believes her sister was kidnapped because she saw this take place right in front of her. She harbors a lot of resentment towards their caretaker who was supposed to protect her and her sister, but also took them away from a university that had a lot of extreme beliefs, I guess you should say. And because of some actions that she went and took, she is awaiting a court date. And then by a stroke of luck, she basically discovers that a letter she has been sending has been responded back to, and the headmistress for Kresley University is asking her to return because she is the sole heiress of her house. And the person that could be left with her house if she does not come back is this vampire that she has learned could possibly be behind why her sister was kidnapped. And there's just a lot of different mysteries, a lot of different history and lore and different things like that. This was a really great book, but like I said, it kind of took me a bit to really get into the story just because it was so dark, but also very fascinating and different at the same time. So I did enjoy this. I know the second book did come out recently, I think at the beginning of November, so I'm hoping that maybe next year after all the holidays, I might be able to go and snag it up. Then the next book I have is Tusk Love by Thea Guanzon, and I rated this one 4.25 stars. This one was definitely a little bit of a palate cleanser because I believe I picked it up after Immortal Dark, and it did take me some time to finish this just because I started it right around when the stressful stuff hit in the month of October. But this was really fun. I had a great time with this. For some of you that aren't aware, this book kind of popped up in Critical Role Campaign 2, and then we were lucky enough to go and get a physical book with it. Now, you don't have to be familiar with Critical Role or D&D to go and pick up this book, but if you are, then you get a little bit more extra excitement through some tidbits that happen to pop up throughout this book when you're reading it. I honestly had a fun little time with this book just because I have watched Campaign 2 at least to the point where this book was mentioned, and so different locations that our main characters traveled through, I was like, oh, I know that place, I know this place too, and oh, I know why Jester was going and talking about this and certain things so much. So with this book we follow Guinevere, who is basically on her way to the person that she has been promised to marry by her parents. But while she is going and traveling, her party is suddenly attacked by bandits. All the guards that were supposed to be protecting her while she traveled are killed off. And she basically is trying to figure out, how am I going to survive this? What's going to happen to me? But then something that she has kept hidden unleashes and kills these guys, but also is potentially going to destroy the dowry that she is supposed to bring to the person she's engaged to. And then in steps Oscar, who basically goes and takes Guinevere out of there and is stuck not only with her, but this random chest that has some items that she refuses to sell or get rid of. And Oscar is not too happy because he had promised his mom that he would go and travel to see her family after his mom had passed. So Guinevere and Oscar are kind of the two unlikely people that are traveling with each other. Guinevere isn't exactly the best at knowing how to survive on the open roads because she's been kept in her house the entire time by her parents. So she's dealing with a whole new world in a way, and I guess in some ways you could almost say that she's a bit like Rapunzel from Tangled, just with the fact that she's been kept locked up for the longest time, and now she's getting to experience the world outside of that, and her traveling companion is just a bit disgruntled, a little bit grumpy, not entirely thrilled to be stuck with her, but there's also this chemistry between both of them that becomes a little too hard to ignore. So this was quite a good book, really enjoyable. I found myself laughing at times, smiling at times, getting a little bit emotional as well. But I will say that this book is also on the spicy side too, so if that is not really something you're interested in, definitely be aware that there is quite a bit of spice in this, because that was basically what this book was about when it was shown in Critical Role Campaign 2. Then the last book that we will talk about is Dead of Winter by Kresley Cole. This is the third book in the Arcana Chronicles. This was actually a reread for me. So what I have been doing is I've been slowly working my way on rereading through the series so that I can read the remaining 2 books. And honestly, this one was still a really fun book for me. I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I really love this series so much, and how a lot of the characters in this story are based off of the tarot cards, and it kind of has this whole Hunger Games appeal to it, where these tarot cards are basically fighting against each other to collect each person's glyphs, and whoever has the most at the end and is the remaining person basically wins before the game ends and it starts again in the next decade. I really love this series so much. I love a lot of different pieces that are in this and the creativity behind it. I do also tend to love dystopian worlds so much, but this was probably one of the dystopian books that I read after the Hunger Games and the Divergent series, so it also holds a very special place in my heart. So if this is a series that you've never heard of and you're interested in picking up, I would highly recommend it just because I enjoy it so much. Not too many people that I know have ever read or picked up this series. Those were the 6 books that I read in the month of October. Like I said, October was a very interesting month. It was kind of a roller coaster with some really high highs and some really low lows. I didn't get to read all of the books that I was hoping to read in this month, but sometimes that's just the way it goes, and I'm glad that I was able to finish at least the books that I mentioned in this video, and I'm excited to see how my wrap-up will go for November, because I feel like so far, knock on wood, it's been going a little bit better. But I hope that you had a great reading month in October and didn't have as many stressful things happen to you like I had in my October. But if there's a book that you really loved reading in October, definitely let me know down in the comments below, and maybe we can go and talk about it. Maybe it's a book I haven't read and I can add it to my TBR. And if you got to this point of the video, maybe go and leave a dice emote just for D&D type of stuff, because I did go and read Tusk Love, which was a book mentioned in a D&D campaign for Critical Role. So yeah, leave some dice if you got to this point of the video and you don't know what to comment. But as always, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate you so much. And as always, I want to remind you all that you're worthy and capable of amazing things. Bye, friends.
Hi, Nugs. Hi. Oh, you just drank water and you spit it in my face. Yeah, you did. You want to say hi? Do you want to say hi?
No, she does not want to say hi.
Oh, hi, Nugs. We got a Nuggie. I'll move the camera a little bit so you can see her.